So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Fraser Nelson, talking about how he's kind of reconsidering his Brexit vote. If this is a global Britain, if this is global Britain, I'm starting to wonder. He's saying, was he right to support Brexit? Now, he's done an interview with no, he didn't do an interview. He chaired a debate between Vince Cable and Daniel Hannan, who all right, we won't talk about Daniel Hannan that much, but not in that capacity. But point being is that we're going to look at that interview at a later date. But this article I found fairly interesting from Mr. Fraser. So let's have a look. So, as a Europhile, okay, you vote for Brexit because you're a Europhile. Sweet. Okay, who voted for Brexit with a heavy and broken heart. I'm always on the lookout for evidence suggesting that I made the wrong choice. Well, that's everywhere. Look in the rivers and the oceans, my friend. I clung on perhaps too long to the hope that the EU would reform. I mean, the best way to make the EU reform is from the inside, not from the outside. We had a veto ability. We chose not to use it when we could have done. But what really tipped it for me was the vision sold by Boris Johnson, Michael Gove and others that would swap a parochial European policy for a world of global Britain. So not a drawbridge up, but out and into the world. So what did you think, that we were going to magic up loads of trade deals with other countries? Like, we're not. These guys need to understand, right? We are not that guy. We are not Big Boss anymore. We don't have an empire. We're not a big power anymore. That's it. We are not the US of A. We're not that guy. In a testable thesis, if correct, then Britain would visibly rewire itself and strike bold trade deals to deepen links with far-flung allies. We'd repair old alliances and strike up a new relationship with Europe. I mean, repair old alliances? Like what? With who? The Commonwealth, we have a fairly decent relationship with those countries, for the most part. A new relationship with Europe, we've done that. It's rubbish. Our relationship with Europe is nowhere near as good as it was. We'd kill populism. Well, Brexit has really just made populism worse. Brexit was run on populism. So, again, that point there, it doesn't make sense. Some of these people do seem very politically just inadequate and illiterate. That's what I'm looking for. Politically illiterate. Talking about how Brexit would kill populism. Brexit has only made populism worse. They thrive off emotions and big promises that we'll never achieve, like a global Britain. So we'd kill populism at home and have a stable government in Westminster. Well, we saw how the last couple of governments went. We'd strengthen the Union. The Union is dead. With Brexit making Scottish independence unworkable, if anything, it's more likely to happen now than it was before. Less red tape would mean more freedom to liberalise, innovate and grow, moving away from the EU's failing model. What you mean, the model that's made EU economies some of the biggest in the world? Germany 4th, France were 5th. Or sorry, I think they've overtaken us. The EU model that's made countries far economically more powerful than they were previously. What are you talking about, my guy? Moving away from the EU's failing model, the EU have done very well. They've done very well considering how badly we're currently doing right now. So again, it's a load of rubbish here. Talking about the need to liberalise, to innovate, to grow. The EU has done that. The EU sets the standard for the rest of the world. How is he not understanding this? There are two entities that set standards globally. One is the USA, the other is the EU. That's it. No one else can set standards like they can. Not even China. He goes on, I chaired a debate between Vince Cable and Lord Hannan, the unelected man, who held similar views on trade but differ on Europe. Hannan spoke, as he always does, with the infectious energy of a revivalist preacher, filling the hall with the Brexity optimism that carried the vote 5 years ago, because that's all he has. That's all he has is words and promises that he will never be able to implement. That's it. You were duped by a guy with decent energy. That's it. The Remain side just didn't have that positive energy that the Leave side had. That was the main difference. People like you were duped by people with high energy and bold promises. Cable was in I told you Ramona mode, or what shows you how open-minded you were, considering you're dubbing this guy as a I told you so Ramona, when he has told you what has happened. We're out of the Dublin 3 agreement. We can't send asylum seekers back. Our rivers, our oceans are now polluted around this country because of Brexit, because we've lowered standards and decided to innovate. Our innovation is sewer polluted water. Like, these people here are very frustrating to deal with, as you can imagine. Like, bro, what are you talking about? I told you so Ramona mode. He's in that mode because he told you what would happen, and it's happened. My main quarrel with Hannan was, where are these sunlit uplands? What happened to us staying close to Europe? The latest figures show our service exports to the EU falling twice as fast as those to the rest of the world. It's because we don't have a service agreement with the EU. That's not hard to figure out. Although the pandemic skews everything, the idea of Britain becoming the EU's single best ally has taken a big knock, because we weren't. We never were. Outside of the EU, the USA will probably be the EU's biggest single ally, not us. Has taken a bit of a knock after the vaccine wars and the Northern Ireland rows, because we're not that close. We never wanted to be that close with the EU. At least certain people in the government don't. They're looking for fights, because that's the only way they can stay in power. They're looking for fights with France over fishing, with the rest of the EU over Northern Ireland. Let's not forget the vaccine stuff at the start of the year. So it's no surprise that we're not in the EU's best books. We're not seen as, we don't have a close relationship, because we're constantly saber-rattling with the EU. And those new alliances, we can all cheer Truss as she Instagrams her way around the world, working on dozens of trade deals. If you're a Brexiteer, you can even suspend the disbelief by not looking too closely at the nature of those deals. But if you do, you can see the flaw. Most of them are rolled over EU agreements, which is true, and that's another problem, because those agreements state EU standards when we are trying to diverge from EU standards. The UK-Ukraine deal, I believe, had those sorts of problems. Where new ground is broken, Brexit Britain seems to be treading with terrified caution. Take the Australia deal, which has yet to be signed. It ought to be huge. Australia is the perfect partner. Why? It's really far away. Have you seen how far Australia is on the map? It's through massive amounts of land as well. You'd have to go through parts of Asia to get there, Europe and Asia. So it's not the perfect trade partner. The perfect trade partners are the ones on our doorstep, because they're close to us. There are less costs and less emissions to trade. Like, my guy, come on. Australia's the perfect partner who we share a language, a sovereign, and much more. Like, those things don't matter. Honestly, they really don't. A language and a sovereign. Who cares? They're not going to buy stuff more from Britain because they also believe in the Queen. Like, that era is gone. Our new trade deal with them is being phased in over 15 years, and if free trade is such a huge threat from Britain, from which Britain needs to be protected, they're doing this because they don't want the impact to be as obvious on farmers yet. That's why they're phasing it in. Come on, mate. The main damage that deal is going to do is to farmers. It only adds around 0.01% to our GDP, and that's at best. It offers between 0.01 and minus 0.01 to our GDP. So again, bruv, what are you talking about? We needed a far shorter timetable. Why? So you can bankrupt farmers quicker. Offering immediate visa access for Aussies. We need skilled workers to fill our vacancies. That's true, but we already had that with the EU. Again, this guy. That is what global Britain is supposed to be about. So you want more bloody foreigners in the country, or is it okay because they're white and they speak the same language as us? Would you want that with India as well, or with sort of other African Commonwealth countries? Is that what you want? Because again, if that's what you want, you would have put it in this article. In public, ministers talk as if now the world is free trade. Talk as if Britain is now the world's free trade superstar when it's nowhere near. The new Trade Secretary, Anne-Marie, was denouncing protectionism as a giant evil a few days ago, but the reason we have protectionism is because we have higher standards and higher living costs than other countries. We can't compete with other countries because they have lower standards and lower living costs. That means their workers are cheaper and their standards are worse, which enables them to make even more money on certain things. Like Australians can use hormone-injected beef, for example, so they can make the cows grow much bigger and much faster than farmers in the UK can. They have mega farms, so it means that their cost per square mile is far more effective because they have more cows on the land. Come on, my guy. Warning about growth hormones injected into Australian cows, or one of Michael Gove's favourites, the chlorine chlorine wash used on American chickens, such arguments take place behind closed doors, and to a depressing extent, the protectionism wins. Like, bruv, if you want to eat hormone beef, yeah, and chlorine wash chicken, fine. Go move to America. They have tons of that stuff over there. Obviously, people in the UK, we don't want that stuff. That's why protectionism is winning. If the UK allowed that, it would decimate agriculture within this country. That's why protectionism exists, to protect certain key industries within the country. You don't want to be reliant on other countries for massive amounts of food imports like we are now, because if anything happens in those other countries, the importing country will suffer. If we've seen how Germany struggled with flooding over the last year, and that would mean a shortage of potatoes. Do you think they're going to sell us the amount of potatoes they've sold us in previous years? No, they're going to keep more for themselves. That's what's going to happen, unless we pay more for the potatoes than the Germans are. So again, this guy arguing out against protectionism, it doesn't make sense. Take, for example, the row a few weeks ago over steel imports. The Trade Remedies Authority, set up to defend UK economic interests from unfair competition, wanted to abolish surcharges on tin cans and other imports. If it gets like actual steel, they wanted to abolish it on, which would have decimated the UK steel production, steel manufacturing, which is already struggling because now the US has got rid of the tariffs they had on EU steel without getting the tariffs they have on UK steel. So that's a problem. So the UK is already struggling globally with other competitors. So he's talking about tin cans here because he wants to minimise the issue, when realistically it's about far more than just tin cans. A dull case, but a good test for a basic notion of free trade. British steelmakers protested, and the Prime Minister had to take sides. So he went with the protectionists. Again, bruv, you've minimised an important issue, which is steel manufacturing, and those kind of manufacturing jobs, they pay quite well. So you'd be decimating a key part of the UK's manufacturing capabilities, which would pose a security risk potentially. And also the fact that we need those good manufacturing jobs to remain in the country, because if you lose those, you lose kind of upper working class and lower middle class people. You either push them into the welfare state, or they take jobs which are far less paying, which impacts them socially and the exchequer financially. Like, my guy, again, what are you talking about? It was the first test case for new free trade watchdog and doesn't bode well. Like, if you want an absolute barnstorm, you want to get rid of all the protectionism, it will cause massive problems for the UK. Like, how do you not understand that? Look around and you can see all kinds of Brexit opportunities that are not being taken. We are free to ditch the notorious GDPR rules, among many other bureaucratic burdens, like you're against data protection rules. Okay then, ask anyone who visits any website to read a legalistic warning. No, you just say you don't want the cookies put on your computer. That's what I do. No one in Whitehall can see the point of this. Again, have you surveyed everyone in Whitehall then to ask them their opinion? Don't think you have. The EU Mortgage Credit Directive no longer controls our mortgage market, but the old credit rules are still being in place, locking some 170,000 homeowners into higher interest rates than they need to pay. Again, I tried to find what that is on Wikipedia. I did find some stuff about it, but it doesn't mention anything about people being charged, being kept into higher interest rates or higher interest rate deals. You can get out of your current deal, but if you do it within 6 months or 3 months before your current deal ends, I believe you have to pay a fee, early repayment charges or some sort of set fee, because you've left the current deal early. Same thing with remortgages as well, or if you want to pay off your current mortgage early, there are certain fees you have to pay unless your current deal has expired. It does mention that here. Member states should ensure that customers have the right to an early repayment. Customers' ability to repay a mortgage prior to the expiry of the mortgage credit agreement. So it means if your mortgage expires in 25 years, you can lessen that by paying it off early when interest rates are lower, if that's what you want to do. May play an important role in order for customers to compare different credit offers and enhance competition in the internal market. So they talk about how they've implemented 7-day reflection periods. Here it is. The directive sets out a requirement for borrowers to have a 7-day reflection. The directive also leaves it to member states to decide whether this right should be granted in the pre-sale period or in the post-sale period, or a combination of the two. So member states have that kind of freedom. It also talks about how lenders are required to make binding offers in relation to a mortgage contract. If the UK jurisdiction lenders were allowed to make conditional offers, the right remains preserved if a binding offer is made at a later stage. So what that means is, if a bank or a society or whatever makes you a mortgage offer, they can't take that off the table and offer you something worse. It's legally binding. You can reject that offer, or you can change it, so you can choose a different rate if you want to, but from the lender's perspective, they can't try and screw you in that regard. So again, I couldn't find anything about this bit here, but it would not surprise me if this guy did not know what he's talking about. George Osborne, this is a funny one. George Osborne tried to sue the EU to stop it imposing a cap on bankers' bonuses, which I believe the UK could have vetoed anyways if it's a part of EU legislation. We could have vetoed it, so why Osborne is trying to sue them, I don't know. Seeing it as an attack on the City of London's power, yeah, let's reward greedy bankers more, because that ended well in 2007, 2008, didn't it, Fraser? Brexit brings freedom to abolish this cap, but it's still there, because evidently they don't want to scrap it because it leads to bad incentives. Scrapping it might look a bit too much like action. What does that even mean? Meanwhile, the EU tries to lure more bankers away from London and into its single market. Do you know why? Do you know what? Yeah, I'm getting tired of explaining this point, so I'm going to get my boy Kai to explain it for them.
That means we're not teammates, we're competitors, and I want action.
Brexit has meant we're no longer teammates anymore. We're not part of the EU single market. We're not members anymore. So we're competitors, and they want action. They want to take away our financial services because that's money in the bank for them. That's why they want to do this. We're not teammates anymore. We're competitors. Like, I'm getting tired of explaining this point to Brexiteers. They don't owe us an equivalency deal, even if we keep our standards high, because that's the nature of politics, my friend. Frost, the Brexit minister, is struggling to hide his frustration with all of this. He has fought as hard as anyone in government for a clean Brexit deal. What does that mean, a clean Brexit deal? If anything, the TCA is a fairly clean deal. So again, what are you talking about? If you wanted to create a deal where we could diverge on standards and still keep tariff-free access to the EU, that was never going to happen. He has fought as hard as anyone, blah, blah, blah. He still fights. He fights still over the Northern Ireland Protocol, which he came up with. But let's ignore that bit. But even seems to be wondering what the fighting is for if the Brexit freedoms are never going to be used. Well, we know Frost is actively looking at the situation to see where he can deregulate and still be part of the TCA. He closed the Thatcher conference by saying that the recipe for a country's success is well known: regulatory restraint and low taxes. That's not true either. It's the opposite. If you want to look at how a country's success is, depending on what metrics you use, you would look at the Scandinavian model. People that are far happier, have way more purchasing power, and have higher standards of living through higher taxes, but also making sure the money circulates properly throughout the economy and doesn't go just to the top, to the owner class, to the millionaire and billionaire class. Have strong restraints so companies can't exploit workers. Have strong rules so workers can be happy and actually have fulfillment in their lives outside of work. So people don't work to live, essentially. So again, his metrics are going to be far different to mine, but low taxes and low regulatory restraint just lead to more financial crashes, like we saw in the 90s, like we saw in the 2000s, and like we're seeing now. He didn't need to point out that the Tories are lifting taxes to a 71-year high, which they are doing. They are raising national insurance, which is going to affect the working class far more, but I don't think Mr. Nelson's too concerned about the working class, but I could be wrong. We'll leave that up to him. He goes on, but this is quite clearly what he thinks is happening now, that Britain is ending up with the opposite of what many Brexit architects hoped to create. I mean, what did they hope to create? Because people like Daniel Hannan were talking about how no one is threatening our place in the single market. What they wanted was for us to stay, essentially to have absolute free access to the EU single market and customs union, for us to absolutely exist as if we were members of the single market and the customs union, while simultaneously striking deals with other countries around the world. That's what they were promising in the first place, which never happened, because it was never going to happen. Such a deal would never be able to work, because other EU members would be like, what the hell? And B, the EU doesn't operate like that. You can't be in the single market and the customs union and set up deals with other countries. It doesn't work. As a force for political stability, Brexit eventually delivered. That's not really true either. Britain is now one of the few countries in Europe with no populists in parliament. Like, bro, what are you talking? Bro, Boris Johnson is one of the king populists. Him and Donald Trump are two of the biggest populists in the world, along with Bolsonaro, along with Modi, along with these people. They are populists. What are you talking about? You guys in the Telegraph keep talking about how Boris Johnson's not your traditional conservative. Why? Because he's trying to get sort of former Labour voters. That's what he's trying to do with his populism, with his trying to appeal to the working class, trying to appeal to the north of England that has been left behind by consecutive Tory governments. Like, bruv, what are you talking about, man? This man needs to go to a politics A-level course. Leaving the EU did not in the end supercharge the case for Scotland's independence. Well, it kind of has pushed Scottish independence more into the conversation. I think COVID has blocked it for now, but I think if Scotland can make a credible case for saying, look, we're going to leave the UK and we're going to join the EU as soon as possible, if they allow us to, they're going to do it. They're going to do it. Like, mate, like, let's be real here, man. This has helped the case for Scottish independence. But the idea of Brexit exerting its own gravitational pull, dragging down taxes and pushing trade up is starting to look like a fantasy, because Brexit has done massive damage to our economy. It's tanked it in the long term by around 4%. And again, it's going to look worse once more financial services and other services start leaving the UK, and you're going to see other companies setting up subsidiaries within the EU, which they didn't have to do before. When we were members of the EU. Now you got like the Cheshire Cheese guy, among other companies, who are setting up subsidiaries and operations within the EU, because it's far easier for them to export their goods that they make within the EU to other EU member states, rather than living as a third member, which has to go through all the customs, all the rules of origins, etc., to prove where the cheese has come from. So again, it looks like a fantasy, because it always was a fantasy. Like, it's not that hard to figure out, my friend. In the end, we go to the last paragraph. If speeches in the House of Commons are anything to go by, there is no end to Tories who think global Britain was more than a soundbite. And if Britain does deserve a future of free trade and low taxes, it'll be up to them to steer the government and their Prime Minister in this direction. But the country is struggling financially. We're facing massive problems with inflation. So again, this utopia is not going to happen. We have a massive shortage in workers due to the fact that the end of freedom of movement has happened. You have less people entering the labour force, and you have a lot of people retiring as well. Again, this is just a really, really shoddy article from a guy who evidently fell for the rhetoric. That's what's happened here. He's fallen for the rhetoric, and I think part of him does regret his Brexit vote, potentially because of the fact that global Britain it was a fantasy. It's not going to happen, and it will never happen. This idea of Singapore on the Thames, a low regulation, low tax state, isn't going to happen because of the way Britain is and the way people want Britain to be. We don't want, we have a country which has higher living standards than a country like Singapore. We have a higher welfare state than those countries as well. I don't know what more to say apart from this man has fallen for a fantasy that's never going to happen, and maybe he's finally understanding what's kind of the implications of his vote. But I don't know if he'll ever actually regret his vote. But he was duped by people like Daniel Hannan, Boris Johnson, and Michael Gove, who promised we would be this global Britain that's going to be a superpower around the world again. It's never going to happen. We aren't that guy anymore, and it's about time these guys understood it. We're not Solid Snake from MGS2. We're more like Solid Snake from MGS4, old and on the way out. We're no longer that guy anymore. We don't have those powers. We have to compete with the EU, which is no easy task, and that's what these guys don't understand. But I've rambled on a lot. How long has this video gone on for? Ouch, that's a long time. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.